From filet mignon to tortillas to shoes, shelves in America are much emptier than they have been in years past. Ordering a refrigerator or a new window for your house could take months. If you ask local grocers, that's the story of 2022. Empty shelves and frustrated customers and a host of other problems. Many are blaming the government. There's even a Twitter hashtag that's hashtag bare shelves Biden. There are food shortages, staff shortages, test shortages. All of this is leading to something that could be even worse, trust shortages. Joining me now to explain why so many things that used to be readily available are now missing is Liberty University School of Business Dean Dr. Dave Brat. Dr. Brat, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, Joseph, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're glad to have you, and I hope that you can clarify some things for us, because there's a lot of bemusement, bewilderment, frustration. Right. Why are these grocery store and other store aisles empty?
Yeah, well, it's a simple answer that's very complex to unpack, but the answer is because we no longer have a free market system. The free market system, from Adam Smith way back when, is based on the price system. Modern microeconomics is called price theory. And there's two ways of allocating things in the world. One is by government fiat, by central command, like all of human history, where we all starved to death for thousands of years. And then miraculously, through the invisible hand, of course, God was involved in that. We achieved the greatest riches imaginable because we allowed prices and the price system to allocate bread to the shelf. So we are no longer using the price system. We're made a massive move toward the government command system. And I know you want to get into inflation too, but that's the perfect example. Yeah. So now we had yesterday morning, the inflation rate came out 7%, the highest in 30 years or whatever. So that's the general price level, right? So we're talking about the price system. The general price level is up 7%. That's big, biggest in 30 or 40 years. And what was the market response? Nothing. They knew it was coming. They know we live in a quasi-socialist environment. In any other decade, when you have 7% inflation rear its head, right? And the phrase there is once the horse is out of the barn, it's hard to get them back in. You would have had devastating news from the markets. But you don't anymore because now the markets have, tech oligarchs. The five big tech firms have market cap equal to China. I didn't say that wrong, right? Just in case people think. So we have total monopolies, no free markets, no small businesses, and that's why the bread ain't on the shelf.
I want to break some of this down because you said basically we moved from a price allocation system to a government allocation system. Right. Now we still see pricing, prices still change. We still find ourselves paying for things. What specifically has happened that you think indicates this change from a price allocation to a government allocation system?
Right. Well, I taught econ, 101 for 20 years, but I always ask my students, you build a house, I'm sitting in a house. House is 100,000 pieces to it. In the old days, you build a house. See if you can name one part of your house that's not regulated by the government. And of course, if you regulate it, that changes the price because it's got all sorts of new rules it's got to follow, right? So you got to have your outlets 6 feet apart now, and you got to have a certain kind of paint in case the baby licks the paint. You don't want something bad to happen. The roof's got to have a pitch, the water heater, the furnace, the air conditioner, everything, right? Every single thing you can name right now is run and managed. The socialists, Marx, right, wanted to take over and own the means of production. He wanted to own capital. Well, they knew they couldn't achieve that. Well, you don't have to own it if you can run it and manage it. So when I was in Congress just 4 years ago, Obamacare remained because Republican leadership wouldn't do anything about it. That's 20% of the economy in healthcare. We just centralized and handed over to the government to run, for another example. And so the hospital CEOs told me, hey, Dave, we like you. We like the way you think. We agree with you. We like your values, everything. But we can't back you anymore because we got this Medicare formulary and the Medicaid formulary of all the drugs. And we got to have the government subsidies and the free candy coming from DC, or we're going to go bankrupt. And they were telling the truth. So the government, it doesn't matter what sector you look at, it's big everything now, right? Big banks, big airlines, big automobile, big tech.
Yeah.
And the government loves that because they can run those, right? They can put their thumb on all those big monopolies, and they're all on the same side now. Those 5 big tech guys I mentioned, the oligarchs, they're all lefties. And the Fortune 500 CEOs are all lefties right now. And, just go look at BlackRock and Larry Fink and all those stories.
Dr. Brat, we've got about a minute left in this segment. You haven't mentioned supply chains yet. And that's typically what we hear about why this is happening in less than a minute. How is that relevant?
Well, so you got the price system, and then the other piece, right, which isn't prices, but it's maintaining the Bretton Woods liberal order we set up after World War II. The answer to that is China. And now China has all sorts of new viruses. There's all sorts of breaking news in the last week, right? Terrible stuff coming up on its way to Beijing for the Olympics. And so that's got markets spooked here finally. But yeah, that's just the common sense part, right? The COVID and the truckers and the shipping and all that. But the price system is the key, because people don't know what the prices are going to be in the future, right? That's why all the shipping went early before Christmas. So retail sales were down this month in December.
Dr. Brat.
Retail sales were down in December because everybody knew we're going to have a disaster. So they shopped early to make sure stuff got under the Christmas tree.
We are in the middle of a great conversation with Dr. Dave Brat of the Liberty University Business School. He's the dean there, about why the shelves are empty at the grocery store. Dr. Brat, thanks for holding over with us.
Sure, you bet, anytime.
Now, you had just mentioned there COVID, and there's components to this. Now, COVID is, of course, making some people sick, perhaps pulling them out of the supply chain and the jobs that they would be performing for all of us. There's also been mandates that have required people to fire people who have been in the supply chain. Do you think either COVID itself or the response to COVID is contributing in any way?
Oh, absolutely. The response has been disastrous. I teach economics, did a PhD. And it's amazing. Science, 8th grade science, which you need a decisive experiment. So just in its simplest terms, you've not seen that yet with respect to COVID, right? A group with it, control group coming out of World Health Organization or Center for Disease Control. And the information we've gotten has just been terrible. And so, that's part of the problem. It caused massive hysteria and fear. It looks like this next wave could be a godsend. Actually, if the death tolls stay as low as they are right now, we could get herd immunity out of this thing. And that'll send major information flows, rational information flows back into the economy. And if that happens, that will greatly help the supply chain issue. But at the same time, the federal government, with all the benefits checks, really messed up the labor market. A lot of people have just checked out, so they're no longer in the labor market. The unemployment rate is very low, but you can go talk to restaurants around wherever you live, and they can't find any workers. So it's a crazy set of just misfiring from the government. And again, it all comes down to not letting the price system allocate resources, including the price of labor, et cetera. We had a government fiat would just shut down everything. It turns out that a lot of that information we were given and firms were given and mandates that were imposed, the Supreme Court just saved the day on one of the mandates yesterday. But yeah, that obviously had a huge effect. In China now, something is spreading and no one's sure what it is around the major cities. And their major cities, by the way, dwarf New York City, right? When I say they're major cities, they have several cities that they've locked down, no shipping. They've locked down the ports, any shipping to Beijing because they want to save the face for the Olympics. And we'll see about that. We'll see whether the Olympics whether they can go forward, because it's looking pretty scary right now.
Now, you raised an issue there that I think merits another longer conversation. Why do we have all these restaurants and everybody's hiring and nobody has enough people? It's like the things are gone, but so are the people. It's like there was a rapture of some kind that took away all the employees. But
$15 an hour, wage rates at $15 an hour, and they can't fill them. Right.
But to the point of inflation is also part of this conversation. Do you think that the supply chain issues leading to a shortage of goods is an explanation for why we're seeing inflation? Because now we have more dollars being pumped into the economy, but they're chasing fewer goods because there's just nothing on the shelf.
I have people yell at me for giving this answer, but the answer is no. You can have something spike prices up over here, but if you're linked to the gold standard or solid cash, other prices have to go down over here. So you can't get, there's only one thing that causes inflation. Uncle Milton Friedman, the greatest economist of the last century, University of Chicago, Nobel Prize winner. It's too much money. When you print too much money, you have too much money chasing too few goods. Money is always, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So back in 2008, if you want to go look it up, the Fed printed too much money in 2004, 2005, and you had the financial crisis and the housing bubble. Right now, they're printing way too much money. We're going to have massive inflation this time. And now it's called the everything bubble, right? It's not just a housing bubble. It's the entire stock market is inflated and it's going to pop. But everybody knows it. There's not an analyst on the market that doesn't know that's going to happen. But everybody's betting, right? It's like a casino. Everybody's just placing their bets on when it happens, but it will happen.
Final question for you, Dr. Brat, Liberty University School of Business. You are a White House advisor. You need to help solve this problem. What do you tell them?
I tell them follow the monetary rule. First of all, if your economy's growing at 2%, you print 2% more money. That's Uncle Milton and John Taylor now out at Stanford. And you tell them you got to reduce the size of the federal government. The politics of this thing, the left is talking about fascism. If you don't like fascism, let's not have a big state to hand to fascists, right? If you have 50 independent experiments like the founders intended, and you stick to the Judeo-Christian religious principles and free markets and constitutional government, we will take off and you'll see growth like you've never seen before, because we do live in an advanced technological world that growth can be exponential for a long time if we set the proper foundations, as everyone listening here knows.
Dr. Dave Brat, Dean of the Liberty University School of Business. Thanks so much for your time today.